Okay, what the hell is going on? That's what I want to talk about here. But let me set up this video. I had recorded a video yesterday. Today is Tuesday, by the way. I had recorded a video on Labor Day that I was going to put up right now that talked about what would happen if Donald Trump was no longer president for whatever reason, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about how the line of succession works, the 25th Amendment works. So I did a video talking about that, which I'm going to include at the end here so you can see that. But I wanted to talk first about the breaking news that's going on right now. Now, you may have heard that the White House has put out a statement. They did this last night, where they said there's going to be a presidential announcement from the Oval Office today at 2 o'clock Eastern time this afternoon. And of course, the speculation is running rampant. And because that's all we can do. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what the hell is going on, especially given the last week where this guy hasn't even been seen. He certainly hasn't addressed the public. And it's even questionable whether he's even been seen. The White House has put out a couple of photos, but there's good reason to doubt the authenticity of those photos or when they were actually taken. So we don't know what the hell's going on, and all we can do is speculate. But I do have some thoughts here. I'm going to tell you what I think are the possibilities. And let me begin by telling you what I think is the most likely possibility. And that is that this is all a distraction from, you guessed it, Epstein and Donald Trump's involvement in all of that. Because the timing here is highly suspicious. Congressman Ro Khanna and Republican Congressman Thomas Massie have a press conference scheduled for tomorrow, in which I believe 10 of Epstein's victims are supposed to be speaking. And they have billed this press conference as being explosive. Now, we don't know what they're going to say, but Donald Trump, this is not going to be good for Donald Trump, that's for sure. And so here, and we've known about this for quite a while. This press conference about with the Epstein victims has been known about for a while. So could this whole last week just been a complete head fake setup leading up to this distraction? I don't know for sure, but I think that is a very likely possibility. Let me put it this way. If this address from the Oval Office, and we'll see if it's live or not. Maybe it's not even going to be live. Maybe it's pre-recorded. I don't know. But if this address is about anything other than his health and why we haven't seen this guy in the last week, then it's nothing but a distraction. It's either about his health or it's a distraction. Now, the last I saw on social media right before I started recording here this morning, there's speculation that he's going to announce that he's renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War. If that's the case, that is one seriously pathetic attempt at a distraction. And I think everybody, if that's the case, I think everybody will call this out as being nothing but a distraction. And it will end up, I think, drawing more attention to the press conference tomorrow, or anyway, I hope that that's the case. But that is really pathetic. Now, it could also be, if it's a distraction, any number of other things. It could be that. It could be that and something else. Maybe he's announcing that he's invading Venezuela. I mean, this man is so desperate to distract and cover up, to distract from Epstein and cover that all up, that he would do anything, I believe. Because I believe his involvement is, I think the things he has done, he is scared to death that they come out. I think it's really, really bad. And if it is, there's nothing he won't do to keep it from coming out and to distract from it. Now, Venezuela, I'm not kidding. He has been moving military assets into place around Venezuela. and threatening Venezuela. Maybe he's going to announce that we're invading. Maybe he's going to announce that we're sending the military into Mexico against their wishes. They clearly said we do not want U.S. troops in Mexico. Maybe he's going to do that. Maybe he's going to make some other kind of crazy pronouncement. Who knows? But if it's anything other than related to his health and why he's been missing for the last week, then it's a distraction from Epstein. So keep that in mind. And here's another thing too to consider. You know, people might say, well, you know, how could this all be a distraction? This guy never shuts his mouth. He can't keep himself from being on camera every single day. And we haven't seen him for much of a week. Well, maybe they've imposed some discipline on him. I could see that this was all just a ruse from the start. And how easy would it be to distract us all into thinking that he's had a major health event, or the wild speculation that he's actually passed away? It would be simple. All they have to do is just keep him away from the cameras. Because that's all we're basing this on, is that we haven't seen him. He hasn't spoken. He hasn't made any public statements. All they have to do is keep him from making any public statements for a week. Maybe send out a couple of pictures, you know, and coach him. Tell him to just, you know, just stand there for the picture, like, because those are the pictures that we got, right? Which only add to the speculation that he's had some sort of a major health event. But that's all they would have had to do. It would be so easy to play this game and to distract everybody, because it's effectively kept everyone distracted for at least the last several days leading up to this press conference, and then they could throw another distraction at us. But I guess we'll find out soon enough. Oh, and by the way, I will be covering whatever happens today. I will be talking about it in depth later on this afternoon on my new channel, the Romano Report podcast. I will link to it in the description below. If you haven't subscribed to that channel yet, please do so. I'll be doing deep dive, long form content on that channel. Okay, so that's what I think is the most likely, but it might be a health incident. It might be, it could even be a resignation. If he, in fact, as many are starting to believe, if it's in fact that he had something like a stroke, maybe a massive stroke, because the theory is that he has recently had a number of mild strokes. Perhaps he has had a more serious stroke. That's the speculation. If that happened, he may very well, number one, maybe he resigned, although can you really picture this guy ever voluntarily resigning? It's possible, but it's hard for me to imagine. But it could be if he's had a major stroke and he's just completely out of it. And I got to tell you, the pictures they released, whether they're staged and phony or not, he looks completely out of it. Anyway, they may have invoked the 25th Amendment. And if that's the case, in that, they said in their press release that the president was going to be making this announcement, not President Trump, just the president, which is a little suspicious potentially. That could be referring to J.D. Vance. Maybe J.D. Vance is already the president. But as you will see later in this video, the problem with that is he wouldn't actually be the president. Invoking the 25th Amendment doesn't actually remove him from office. He would only be acting president. But if that were the case, perhaps the White House would nonetheless refer to him as the president. In fact, if he's acting president, J.D. Vance is full of himself too. He would probably order that he be order the White House to refer to him as the president as long as he's exercising presidential authority. If that's the case, and Trump is drooling in a corner somewhere, then at 2 o'clock when the cameras are on, we might see J.D. Vance sitting behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, explaining to us that they've had to invoke the 25th Amendment because of some major health issue. I don't know. It could be any one of those things, and maybe some things that we haven't thought of yet. But if I had to bet, just because of the suspicious timing of this, an Epstein victim press conference tomorrow, and then today he's making some weird 2 o'clock mid-afternoon Oval Office address, that doesn't happen. So, and then the fact that he's been, gone from public view for almost a week. Yeah, highly suspicious. I fully believe that his involvement is horrible and criminal, and he would do anything to cover it up. This could very well be, and that's what I would put my money on, a distraction from Epstein. But I don't know, and maybe it is health related, but we're going to find out soon enough. So anyway, check the show notes below, subscribe to the Romano Report podcast, and I'll talk much more after we know what has happened. I'll talk this afternoon about it. But until then, please watch the video that I recorded yesterday. Enjoy. As of right now, as I'm recording this, we still don't know for sure if this criminal piece of shit is with us, or whether he has crossed over and is in a really, really hot place right now, or whether he's lying in a vegetative state somewhere, or whatever. We don't know his condition. Now, maybe that by the time this video posts, we will know. The proofs of life that we've been given over the last 48 hours are highly questionable in and of themselves. So I don't think we really know what's going on with this guy. But in anticipation that he is, something happens to him one way or another, I want to talk about what comes next in the various circumstances, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. So let's take a couple different scenarios, shall we? What happens if he actually kicks the bucket? Now, let's just assume that we find out about this and they actually tell the public. That's not an assumption I think we should make, but for purposes of this video, let's just assume that they actually are on the level with us and inform us if that happens. Because, I mean, I think it's highly questionable if they would. I think they probably, at least for a time, maybe a long time, they would just carry on. J.D. Vance, Russ Vaught, Stephen Miller, all of these people would just continue tweeting from his account, putting out phony pictures of him from like 3 years ago and pretending it was today. They would pretend that he's still alive. But just for purposes of this this video, let's assume that they would level with us. Okay, so scenario one, he kicks the bucket. What happens then? Well, J.D. Vance becomes president, right? And we all understand that. That's pretty much the only role of a vice president, is to take over in the event that the president is no longer president for whatever reason, death, resignation, impeachment and removal, whatever. Vice president becomes president. The only other real job the vice president has is to break ties in the Senate. There's no other substantive role for the vice president in our system other than ceremonial things, like presiding over the certification. He has no substantive role in that. All he does is he opens the envelopes. That's it. That's all he gets to do. So that whole January 6th wanting Pence to throw out electoral votes, yeah, I can't do that. Anyway, okay, so he kicks the bucket. J.D. Vance becomes president. But then there becomes, everybody understands that, but then there becomes an opening for vice president, right? Now, a lot of people, judging by things I'm reading, seem to think that since the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is third in line or second in line in the line of presidential succession, that he would move up to vice president. People seem to think that there's just like a line, and if one person in the line is taken out of the line, everybody just moves up a spot. That's not how it works. That line of presidential succession is only presidential succession, not vice presidential succession. So Mike Johnson would not become vice president automatically. What would happen is the new president, J.D. Vance, would nominate a vice president who would then have to be confirmed by the Senate. Now, he could nominate Mike Johnson, but he probably wouldn't. He'd probably nominate somebody else. The point is, the Speaker of the House doesn't automatically become vice president. So just to clear that up. Another thing I want to address about this. If J.D. Vance becomes president, however it might happen, people tell me all the time when I talk about how we need to impeach and remove this orange piece of shit criminal from office, because that's what we should do, obviously. Not going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately, but that's what should happen. People always tell me, All right, I always get some people saying, careful what you wish for. Essentially, J.D. Vance would be so much worse. I don't buy it. I just don't. We don't know what the hell J.D. Vance would be like. The guy's a friggin' chameleon. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that he was adamantly opposed to Donald Trump. Remember, he called him America's Hitler. He said, "I'm not a Trump guy. I would never vote for Trump. Trump is, he had some of the worst criticisms of Trump of anyone. I mean, he hated Donald Trump. Then he decided he wanted a career in politics, so he realized he has to pander to the cult, start kissing Trump's ass. He gets elected to you understand his trajectory. The point is, we don't know who the real J.D. Vance is. Could be he goes back and tries to be more of a normal Republican. I honestly don't expect that to happen. I think he has come to power by riding Trump's coattails and pandering to the cult. So I think he would continue doing that. He's also controlled by people like Peter Thiel and other oligarchs. So he's going to do their bidding to a large extent. So I don't expect him to revert back to traditional Republicanism. I think he's full on MAGAfied now. And his inclinations might even be to be worse than Donald Trump. And one of the reasons why people might think that he'd be worse than Trump is that he's clearly smarter than Trump. He's not a stupid guy. Trump, on the other hand, is a blithering idiot. J.D. Vance is not. So evil and smart is much more dangerous than evil and stupid, one would think. However, I think that is offset, importantly, by the fact that J.D. Vance, I do not believe, and I could end up being wrong about this, but I do not believe will ever have control over the cult the way that Donald Trump does. My opinion about this whole thing is that, and I've been talking about this for a while, and I'm convinced of it, but again, I can't see the future. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain that this whole cult thing does not survive the loss of Donald Trump as the cult leader. Cults typically do not survive the loss of their leader, unless the cult is organized around some principle or philosophy or something. But when it's a personality cult, as MAGA is, they don't survive the loss of that personality cult leader. This is a full-on personality cult. They don't believe in anything. There is no principle, there's no policy, there's no nothing that unites them other than Donald Trump. When Donald Trump is out of the picture, they're going to shatter. You're already seeing them start to fight with each other. And some of it pretty bad and open, and I can only imagine what's going on behind the scenes. But as soon as the dear leader, the orange convict, is out of the picture, it's going to be open MAGA warfare. And so and it's not going to easily transfer to some other cult figure. And J.D. Vance ain't got it, okay? He doesn't. I don't think it transfers to anyone else. I think the cult implodes. It's I can't wait for it, by the way. I think it's going to be friggin' awesome. So because of that has been Donald Trump's superpower, is blind allegiance from the cult. That will be gone. That is the only thing that has gotten him through. He completely controls the cult. That means he controls the Republican Party, because the cult controls the Republican nomination process. That's why all of them are afraid of Donald Trump putting out a tweet, backing a primary challenger. They're all afraid of that. They're also afraid of the violence that this cult could direct towards them and their families and stuff like that. J.D. Vance is not going to have the loyalty of a cult the way Donald Trump does, and therefore he's never going to have the same kind of power that Donald Trump does. Now, if he were president, he'd have all the bullying powers of the presidency, and maybe he uses it to great effect. I don't know. But I just don't think he would be bad. I think it's the most likely case is he doesn't revert to a traditional Republican. He will be very bad, but I just don't think he will be as bad as Donald Trump. And honestly, it's something we really don't need to spend too much time speculating about. The only reason I brought it up here is because I hear this a lot. Because the truth is, we don't control. It doesn't matter what we think, whether he would be bad or worse than Trump or not. We have no say. It's gonna be what it is, right? But my feeling is he wouldn't be as bad because he would not have the personality cult. And also my feeling is one piece of shit at a time, right? Let's get rid of the piece of shit we have, and then we'll deal with the next piece of shit if we have to. So anyway, that's my feeling on that. Now, moving on to the 25th Amendment, because that's a real possibility too. One of the things, there's lots of speculation about what's wrong with him health-wise, congestive heart failure, this and that. I read a long piece that was quite persuasive that this person made the case, the medical case, and based on what we know, which is limited, we have to go by our observations because we don't get truth out of this White House. But based on the observations of things we know, made a strong case for the idea that Trump has suffered a series of strokes. And then he may have had a big one here recently. I don't know, but it was persuasive. It's definitely plausible, in my opinion. So it's possible that we could have a 25th Amendment situation arising soon. If he's in a vegetative state, okay, obviously he can't discharge the duties of the president. Now, what would happen if they invoked the 25th Amendment? Well, I tell you what would not happen. And this is a lot of misunderstanding about the 25th Amendment. Trump would not be removed from office. That's not how the 25th Amendment works. He would still be president, even if he's lying there drooling on himself in a corner, just in a coma or whatever. He would still be president. It does not. The 25th Amendment does not remove the president from office. What it does is temporarily strips the president of his authority to be exercised by the vice president. The vice president would essentially be acting president. The vice president would not be the president. They would be the acting president. And it was designed for if a president is incapacitated for some reason. It could be any number of things. And you could do it, either a president can invoke it voluntarily, as other presidents have done, like when they've gone under surgery or whatever, they've invoked the 25th Amendment, told everybody the vice president will be acting president while I'm in surgery and until I recover or whatever. Or it could be done involuntarily. The vice president and the cabinet can say, hey, we're invoking the 25th Amendment, even though the president, the president's out of it, the president's a nut, the president, whatever. They could do it against his will or without his knowledge if he's in a coma. But they could also do it against his will. And the president could say, no, I'm fine. You're not stripping me of my power, in which case the issue, whoa, sorry about that. We Italians, we got to talk with our hands. In that case, the issue would be decided by Congress, whether or not to temporarily strip the president of his authority and give it to the vice president. But it would have to be continually reviewed. The president could come back later and say, hey, I'm better now. And so it would be a constant fight in Congress whether or not to continue to strip the president of his authority. But he would still be president. The vice president would not be president. He would still be vice president. But in the case of, Donald Trump, the vegetable, obviously it would be without his knowledge, one would think, if he truly was in sort of a vegetative state. If he was just really sick and deranged, I could see it being involuntarily. Anyway, the point I want to make about the 25th is simply that Trump would still be president. We wouldn't necessarily be rid of him, depending upon what the nature of the disability is. It could be that he is restored at some point. Anyway, I guess that's all I wanted to talk about for now. I really got to get going. I actually went longer on this than I intended to. But if you have any questions about any of that, if I didn't make myself clear, if you want further explanation, please leave a comment. I always appreciate when you do that. And hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.